Good morning, Kingston. I'm Vice Consul Mario from American Citizen Services here with Non-Immigrant Visa Chief Jeff. We are excited to be here. It has been a long time. I know you guys are excited to hear about some new information with regards to the J-1 Visa Exchange Program. As you are aware, the J-1 Visa Exchange Program has a rich history, starting all the way back in 1961, founded by Senator Fulbright. So I am going to let the subject matter expert speak on the J-1 visa program, as well as field your questions. Jeff, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mario. And thanks everybody for being here this morning. My name is Jeff Osweiler. I'm the non-immigrant visa unit chief here at U.S. Embassy Kingston. Very happy to have everyone here, and we're very happy to have a chance to talk about J visas. Very important category for us here at Embassy Kingston. Jamaica is actually one of the leading countries around the world in the number of J visa participants we send each year to the United States. And I know the last couple of years have been very difficult ones for the J visa program. I know a lot of folks had difficulty getting in on the program in 2020 and 2021. And we're very happy to have a chance to talk to you, answer questions, and move forward this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, we have a number of questions. There's one pressing one with regards to why visas get denied. I'm actually going to post that on the screen here. Would you speak to why a visa is typically denied?
So a visa could be denied for a number of different reasons. I'd say the most common in the J visa category is usually a documentary issue. So the applicant is missing a required document for the issuance of the visa. It could be their DS 2019. It could be evidence of their SEVIS fee payment, or some other particular documentary requirement for the issuance of the visa. Beyond that, it could be a range of different things. If you do have a documentary issue, we do give you an opportunity to provide that. Usually you can do it by courier or mail. It's sent in, and then we can complete processing of the case.
Is there a time frame in which one would have to deliver those documents?
Well, we prefer it as soon as possible. So as soon as you get that pink letter that requests an additional document, we ask you to send that in using our courier service. And as soon as we receive it, we'll be able to continue processing your case.
Awesome. Thank you. What are some of the factors that will contribute to a student, you just spoke to that, not getting the visa? What's some of those documents that they're missing, aside from the SEVIS document and the other documentary evidence?
Part of qualifying, Mario, for the J visa category is demonstrating that you're an eligible student. So you might be asked for documentation relating to your student status, for example. The officer might want to establish or reestablish that you're actually a qualified bona fide student for this case.
Okay. And being denied a visa, would it have an impact on future applications for work and travel?
Depends on the circumstances, and it depends on the nature of the denial. But again, we want to make sure folks are bringing proper documentation, coming in prepared. In fact, I might suggest a few different things or tips or strategies to folks that are out there from our perspective that can help us help you as we go into this season.
Okay.
So the first thing I'd say is this year, so far so good. We've been opening up a lot of availability in the J visa category. In fact, in February of 2022, we've actually quadrupled the number of appointments we've had available since 2020. That was the last full year we did visa processing in the J category. Just before the pandemic, February of 2020, we were going full steam ahead. Obviously, March came along, and it really stymied the number of applications we could take in 2020. In 2021, we were under a presidential proclamation that precluded us from issuing J visas all the way up to the 1st of April, 2021. Thankfully, this year, we don't have those restrictions. We have some limits on staffing. We still have to be sensitive to social distancing. But this year, we're able to offer a very good number of appointments. And as I said, in February so far, we've already done quadruple the number we did pre-pandemic, which is great news for everybody, I think.
Absolutely.
I'll also say a few different suggestions as you get into this year to help students as they come in for their appointments. The first thing I'll suggest is come early. We're making this availability up front in the season. We want to address as much visa demand as possible early in the year, but do take advantages of those slots, because as we get further into the calendar, we might not be able to offer as many, especially as we get into the months of May and June. So take advantage of those applicant appointments now, get your application in, come in for your interview, and get the visa taken care of as quickly as possible. The second thing I'd suggest is make sure to come prepared. We talked about this a little bit already when we discussed denials. Make sure you've got all the required forms. Make sure that DS 2019 is current. Make sure it reflects the actual placement that you've been given. Make sure your service fee is paid and you have evidence of that payment. And again, anything else that pertains to your qualifications for the J Summer Work and Travel Program, make sure you bring that with you to interview. If you're not ready the day of your interview and we have to request documentation or even ask you to come back for a re-interview, this can significantly delay the processing of your visa. The third thing I'll suggest is make sure you know your rights. So you're going to the United States for an exchange program where you will be engaging in work. And it's very important to us that your rights are protected and respected in the United States. Every applicant that comes through is going to receive one of these pamphlets, which will explain what your rights are in the United States. And if you encounter any issues, if you feel your rights have been violated, there's a direct contact number where you can report that and get some assistance for your situation. So very important you understand that as we come in. And finally, make sure you know your responsibilities. The most important one is you have to respect the terms of the program. In Jamaica, the maximum length of participation in J is 4 months. And you do have to return by the date you're given at the port of entry. So when you arrive in the United States, the immigration control officer will take your passport. He'll stamp what's called an AUD, an admit until date. That tells you when you have to return, how long you're allowed to remain in the United States. And you have to respect that date. Generally speaking, J Summer Work and Travel students are given 30 days past the end of their program in the United States in order to engage in cultural exchange, travel, things that they can do after they complete their exchange program. Even with that, they still have no more than 4 months, and they must return before the start of their school term the next fall, unless they've just graduated.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. As you can see, there are a number of requirements in order for you to be successful on your interview. Feel free to send us an email if you would like one of the vice consuls to reiterate some of this information at kingstonniv@state.gov. Additionally, we have a website listed from travel.state.gov that can provide you additional information. Jeff, some viewers are concerned with the dress code or attire. What impact does the dress or attire have on an interview?
At the interview itself?
Yes.
That's really up to the applicant. We don't have a particular dress code. People come in a number of different ways. You might be a student, you're coming here from class. We understand it's just part of your day and you're here for your appointments. We don't have a particular dress code requirement.
So if you are applying to be a doctor, there's no need to come in a doctor's robe or? Okay.
Not specifically. I mean, again, people have busy lives. You're going to come to the embassy when you can, and you'll come as you are.
Absolutely. Thank you. With regards to transcripts, what if your official transcript is not ready by the interview date? Would that be a cause of an interview denial?
It might delay. If the officer wants to see your transcript and have a sense of where you're at right now in your program, or how you're performing, or whether you're still a bona fide student, it'll be an important part of their assessment. So do try to have that available and ready for the officer when you come to the interview. If you don't, they might give you a pink letter. You're asked to produce that. Likely you'll be able to send that in so they can review it at their desk rather than having you come back for a re-interview.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
With regards to a parent living overseas for an extended period, will this affect the likelihood of a visa approval?
So if the applicant's parent is living overseas, like
Yes.
in the United States.
Yes.
So one of the assessments in a program is whether you have sufficient ties here in Jamaica to compel your return. The standard sort of immigrant intent type assessment of an applicant. So that might be part of the line of questioning that an officer asks about, and it is part of the consideration in the issuance of most visa categories.
Okay. Is there an age cutoff for applying for a J1 visa?
There is no specific age cutoff, but you do have to have bona fide student status. You'll have to demonstrate that in order to secure the DS 2019, the form that ties you to the sponsor and the recruiter, and as well as the window. The officer might ask and will want to know more about your student status.
Can you also speak to the recruiter-prospective student relationship and how that is started? Would the student reach out to a recruiter, or would the recruiter reach out to the student about potential programs in the U.S.?
So it's a good question, and we often are asked whether we can place students in a particular program in the United States here in the consular section. Our role is really the issuance of the visa, the processing of the visa case. Recruiters do come to Jamaica. They have large events, they go to the universities, and they're reaching out directly to potential applicants and recruiting them for J1 summer work and travel in the United States. So I would be aware of announcements at your university or school that provide information about recruitment or that try to promote recruiters that are active in the country.
All right, thank you. If someone tried to enter the U.S. 2 days prior to their eligibility or certificate of eligibility, DS-19, would they be able to enter prior to the start?
So you can enter up to 30 days before the start of your program, technically speaking. That might raise some issues or questions if you're entering a long interval before the start of your program, but under the terms of the program, you can enter up to 30 days. You're also allowed, if the AUD, the admit until date on your passport allows for it, to remain up to 30 days after the end of your program. Again, the idea being you've done some work, you've had an exchange, you have an opportunity to travel and experience the country a little bit. Because really, that's the purpose of the program. It's an exchange program. It's meant to connect you to the United States and give you an experience there. So they allow for that in the time you're given.
What if someone wanted to visit their family prior to starting their program, 2 months prior to the program, or they wanted to explore the U.S. outside of the state that their program is located in?
If you are entering early, as long as you're within the terms of the program, 30 days before and no more than 30 days after, if your admit until date allows for it, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. Can you speak to some of the questions that a vice consul will pose during an interview?
Different vice consuls will ask different questions in different ways, but really their primary role is assessing whether you're qualified for this visa category, if you have all the documentary requirements for the visa, and if there are any other ineligibilities that apply to your case. That can take a number of different forms. I really can't give you a typical interview because people approach this in different ways. But like I said, so long as you're a bona fide student, you have the documentary requirements for the program, you're able to speak about your needs, interest, and intent in engaging in the program, and the officer is convinced that you intend to return, the interview should go smoothly.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Additionally, on the transcript, what if a prospective student does not have the courses which they're applying to study in the U.S. not listed on their transcript? Would that have a negative impact on their application?
Well, remember, people that are placed in these exchange program, summer work and travel placements, they're doing a whole range of different types of things. They may or may not relate to their actual program of study back here in Jamaica. And part of the point is to give them a cultural experience, not necessarily an educational opportunity that's directly related to their core program. So that's just fine. We get plenty of folks that might be studying medicine here, but they're going to work at maybe a summer camp or an amusement park over the summer.
Yeah, can you speak more on that? There are a number of categories that the J1 visa covers outside of being a student or teacher. Can you speak more on some of those categories?
Sure. So the most popular here in Jamaica is summer work and travel. And again, this is usually a program where you're admitted for up to 4 months, usually to work in a service environment, sometimes other types of places. In addition to that, there's a J category for camp counselors. And the requirements for that are a little more specific and precise. In many cases, you have to have some relevant experience in order to make the case for actually qualifying for that visa.
Thank you. There's another question. The legal steps to, if someone wanted to get a refund, that they were not satisfied with their summer program and they wanted to get a refund from the agency that they were contracted through. How does that go? How does that happen?
It's a good question. We occasionally get these questions, but this is really about the relationship between the recruiter and the recruited student. So we are not really in a position to insert ourselves in some kind of a conflict or a dynamic between the recruiter and the student. If they're seeking a refund of fees paid to a placement agency or a recruiter, they have to approach them directly. There are some mechanisms to express issues with a recruiter or recruitment agency back to ECA, Educational and Cultural Exchange. It's the bureau of our department that oversees the program generally. But for us at the visa window and as we process the visa case, we don't really have a role or a hand in the relationship between recruiters and placed students.
Would you advise them to seek any local attorneys or authorities to pursue a case?
That's a possibility. I know the Ministry of Labor and Social Security here has been interested in this issue about the dynamic between recruiters and students and how those relationships are developed or contracted. But again, as part of the visa process, what we really do here in the consular section, it's outside of our purview.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, if someone was denied a tourism visa, B1, B2, will that have an impact on applying for a J1 visa?
It depends on the nature of the refusal. So in most cases, someone that's denied a tourist visa, it's usually what we call 214B, intending immigrant. This is not a permanent refusal. That can happen for a number of different reasons. If you come in for a subsequent application, you'll be assessed on the merits of your application for that visa at that time. Your circumstances might have changed, or your qualification for this particular visa category might be different. So it really depends. If it's a different type of eligibility, it might have a bearing on this case, criminal conviction, something like that. But in most instances, it's a 214B refusal that is not permanent. It can be reassessed in the next visa application.
Thank you. There are some concerns about listing your emergency contacts. If your emergency contact is a family member, will that have, or is not a family member, is either or important to the application process?
So the primary purpose of the emergency contact field is just that. We encourage you to use the person that's most appropriate as your emergency contact. If something should happen, who do you want contacted? Who should we reach out to, or who should authorities reach out to in order to best assist you? That's all. There really is no specific function of that in the assessment of your qualifications for the visa itself.
Okay. Thank you. We in no way encourage staying over the 30 days once your program ends. There are some concerns with teetering the line, how long one can stay. Can you speak to just abiding and complying with the law?
Absolutely. So the first thing I'll say is, and I'll mention again, when you enter the United States, Customs and Border Protection, that's the actual authority that admits you to the United States. It's going to put a stamp in your passport, and it's going to list the date by which you should return or at least leave the United States. Respect that date. If that date you feel is in error, for example, it doesn't include the 30 days you're meant to be accorded after the conclusion of your program, talk to the entry officer about it at that time. You want to make sure that's correct before you leave the entry wicket with the CBP officer. Once that's in your passport and you've walked away, there are some mechanisms to change that, but very few. It's very difficult. So respect that date. If it says be back by 31st of July, make sure you've exited the United States by the 31st of July. Other common scenarios, maybe you're not happy with your placement, things are not working out where you're doing your exchange, and you decide to walk away from the program or leave the program. Once you are no longer part of your exchange program, you must exit the United States. Your status covers your participation in the program. You cannot remain in the United States once you've been separated from that program.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, with regards to the official transcript, for example, if an applicant could not get the transcript in time and they wanted to have it scanned, uploaded, and then they printed it out, would that suffice for a transcript?
We generally require an original of the transcript because it contains the stamp and other authorization documentation that helps us be satisfied it's a genuine document. So generally speaking, we're going to require an original. The good news is, through our service provider, you can courier that document in, the officer can review it, and it can be returned to you by courier with the passport and visa if it's issued.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. All right, we have another question. If someone booked their flight to one of the states, if their program was located, and they needed to go to the school office first, would that have any, or they needed to go to another location out that's not listed on their J1 visa application, going to a different address, would that have an impact on their stay in the US?
Well, again, as long as they're respecting the bounds of the program and the terms of their visa, that should be fine. So if you intend to arrive in the United States a bit early and you're going to do some travel en route to your exchange destination, some people might arrive at one location and take different transportation to their final destination and site of program. Just make sure what you're doing is consistent with the bounds of the program itself. If you're staying over the length of your program, that's probably going to be a problem. If you're going to a different location and not even engaging in your exchange, obviously that's not in conformance. But these types of things, especially if you're following your program with some personal travel after, that's baked in to the program itself. And that's part of why these visas are offered, to give you that opportunity and prospect.
Awesome. Can you speak to the having sufficient financial resources to ensure that you will have adequate resources to sustain yourself while on the J-1 visa?
So a lot of this has to do with working conditions and living arrangements and those types of things. But obviously we want to make sure participants are able to have adequate means when they're engaged in their program. That's really mostly addressed at the level of the recruiter and sponsor for the program itself. It might come up in a visa interview as part of the contextual information that an officer uses to look at your case. But having adequate means to return is certainly something we want to make sure you have. But again, I think people overestimate the level and precision of day-by-day detail they're going to have to provide to the officer to satisfy the terms and conditions of issuance.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. You also mentioned the Wilberforce Rights. Can you speak to that?
So Wilberforce, this is the law that requires us to distribute this pamphlet and this information. And it's an act that is basically meant to protect temporary workers, students, exchange visitors, a whole range of different types of people that go to the United States. More than anything, we are required to certify at the visa interview that you've read and understood this pamphlet and that you understand what your rights are in the US. The most important part of it is right here on the front cover. It's this phone number you can call if you feel that your rights have been violated. And again, it's a value of the United States that workers are protected, and we want to make sure you have the information you need to see that your rights are protected while you're there.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Jeff, personally speaking, have you applied for an immersion program when you were not too long ago in college? Have you experienced a cultural exchange program, and how was your experience?
So you'd be hard pressed to meet a foreign service officer working in the Department of State that hasn't done some type of exchange in university. And I did when I was a university student. I did an exchange in Ireland for about a year.
Oh, nice. Okay. Did you have to know some of the language there, or what was your application process in obtaining your transcripts and all the required documents?
So at that time, to study in Ireland, this was in Northern Ireland, so part of the United Kingdom, you weren't required to have a visa in order to engage in a term of study that was less than, I believe, 12 months. Okay. So I could at least present evidence that I had registered at the university and go attend classes. It was fairly straightforward.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I know we have a few more questions out there. Back to the transcript, does your GPA weigh on your J-1 visa application?
So remember, to qualify as a J Summer Work and Travel participant, you've got to establish that you're a bona fide student. That's part of how you get the DS 2019. You work with the recruiter, and the issuance of that document depends in part on you showing that you have that status. The officer naturally is going to want to reconfirm that in some way at interview and to see how things are going right now. You might have gotten your DS 2019 months ago. If you were in marginal circumstances at university, they might want to reconfirm that you still have student status there. So they might ask for that transcript as part of that process. But again, really varies, depends on the circumstances of individual applicants and students, the nature of the interview, and again, it's the officer's discretion to require or request additional types of documentation to establish that you qualify.
Thank you. And Jeff, you've spoken to the DS
2019. Yeah.
2019. Are there a limited number of DS 2019s issued each year, or are there unlimited? How does that work?
So there's not a numerical limit. There's not a cap like there are for immigrant visas or for certain types of H visas, those types of things. I will say, though, the earlier you start the process, the earlier you get your documentary requirements in line, the better off you will be. We have a large number of students that maybe they are late into the season, they still haven't received their DS 2019. It can be a challenge for them in order to get everything in line to qualify for the visa before they need to be at their program. I will say we get a number of students each year that the program date has already passed, and they present for interview maybe within just a few weeks of the end of program. That's a challenge. We have to make sure or assert or establish that your program is still realizable. If you're within a week or two of the end of the program, it's not likely that your program is going to be realizable. So do start well in advance. Make sure you're getting your documentation, get your interview appointment early. We're making plenty available on the front end of the season to do the best we can to accommodate you.
Thank you, Chef. And also with regards to the 30-day grace period before and after the program, will that apply to Jamaica, the 4-month requirement? Does that apply to any country under the J1?
The program dates, the length or duration of the program is usually determined by country, and that's established based on the academic calendar in those countries, generally speaking. So in the case of Jamaica, there's typically a 4-month interval between the end of classes and the beginning of classes the next fall, and that's what kind of determines the program duration or length. And for Jamaica, it is 4 months.
Okay. Here's another question. Does one have to be a Jamaican national in order to qualify for the J1 visa program if they're living in Jamaica? They have dual citizenship.
So generally speaking, we are looking at Jamaican applicants for the summer work and travel program. There are some limited opportunities for third country nationals, maybe people that are resident here, to make application. If you are a bona fide resident of Jamaica, let's say you're a student from Trinidad and you're studying at UE, you can make your application here because you are resident here in Jamaica and you can make your visa application in this country. What's not as possible is flying in from another country specifically for the purpose of acquiring that visa here rather than back in the other country. So let's say you can't get an appointment in the Bahamas, but you can see one available in Jamaica and you want to come here to get that visa. We have some allowances for third country nationals, but not a lot of spaces. So it's more difficult.
Okay.
But if you can establish residency, that you're a bona fide resident here, like a student from another country, that's just fine.
Okay. There seems to be interest in insider information here with regards to the questions that will be posed. I understand that we can't, because it's a case-by-case basis. There are really no standardized questions because each applicant is different. Can you speak to some of the nuances in conducting a J1 interview?
Like I said, every interviewer and officer is going to have a slightly different style, an order of question, what they emphasize. How you respond might dictate how they focus and ask other questions. So it's really difficult to get into any sort of specifics about what the nature of the interview will be like. The best advice I can give you is to look to your documentary requirements for the program. So like I said, if there are objective, concrete requirements to qualify as a J summer work and travel student, those are the things the officer is going to be most concerned about or need to satisfy in order to issue you that visa. So if you want to know how best to prepare, it's have your documents in order, make sure you know their program requirements, and make sure you're addressing them adequately.
Thanks, Jeff. Also, following the interview, what's the turnaround time for the visa, the J1 visa?
So typically from the time you conclude your interview until the time the visa is delivered to you at the Document Service Center. We have a Document Service Center here in Kingston. It's over on Arden Road. When the visa is issued, it goes back to them and it's collected there, or you can make arrangements for courier delivery. Usually post-interview, that's about 2 days, maybe 3 business days between the end of your interview and the production and delivery of the visa if it's issued.
Awesome. And for a J1 candidate or one who is currently in their program, they love the program, they want to extend in the program, how does the extension request work and how long can that extension last?
So there are a few nuances to extension or status changes while you're in the program. The 4-month overall requirement still applies. You can't do the program more than 4 months. You can only extend with the same employer. Let's say that sponsor. So let's say that you need, or the employer needs another 2 weeks for you to work at that particular location. They've asked you to do that. You can work with the recruiter and the sponsor in order to make those arrangements, but it has to be with that same organization. It has to be within the terms of the DS 2019 that you have. If you hear of another job at another site with another sponsor, you've got to exit the country, acquire another visa, and go back in on that new visa with the new DS 2019. So you can't jump ship willy-nilly. You've got to have the documentary requirements to do it.
Thanks, Jeff. One of our popular visas, the H visa. The J1 visa doesn't have any impact on the H2 visa, right? Or would that have an impact after completing your program and applying for the H2 visa? Would that have any impact on that?
So, one doesn't preclude the other, one doesn't make you more qualified for the other. We certainly see a lot of folks that have had J's in the past, and maybe they're doing H's of one kind or another now, but they're not specifically linked. The one thing I can say is you can't do both at once. You can't hold them concurrently. You can't simultaneously be working on a J and working on an H.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. What if I wanted to travel, a J1 visa holder wanted to travel with a B1, B2 visa holder to another state or another country? Is that possible?
If you're within the terms of the J visa, you're no more than 30 days before the start of your program, you're not remaining more than 30 days after, you're respecting that admit until date, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing that precludes you from engaging that travel if you're within the bounds in terms of your visa itself. Now, if you leave, like I said, if you leave the program early and want to go on a trip with another visa holder, you're going to be out of status on the J. So you have to leave the country once you leave that program.
Well, Jeff, what if someone develops a friendship that becomes more than the friendship on their J1 visa? Would they want to marry someone? How does that work?
So there are circumstances under which an adjustment of status in the United States is possible. A lot depends. I mean, there are many different nuances that come to bear on whether you qualify for an adjustment of status. And that's a determination made by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service if you're inside the United States.
Okay, thank you. All right, we do have a question about how to answer the questions posed. I would say just be honest and as transparent as you can be. The Vice Consul does have information that we're privy to, so it's just best to be transparent. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Telling the truth is always the best policy. If you're asked a question, just try to answer it as best you can and as plainly and as honestly as you can. But again, this isn't a got you type of exercise. You're being told in their program requirements for the J Summer Work and Travel what's required to get the visa. Pay attention to those, make sure you're addressing them, make sure you have all the documentary requirements for the visa, and things should go smoothly.
Awesome, thank you. Can a family travel on a J1 visa if the spouse is approved and the children would like to accompany the spouse to that program? Can they travel with the spouse?
So remember, J is a category that's pretty broad, and it includes more than just summer work and travel. So there are other types of J exchange participants that might have what are called J2s. They're derivatives, spouses, children, people that are going to accompany them while they're on this program. So sure, there are categories of J that are available to spouses and family members. Popular category here in Jamaica, we have a lot of teachers that go to the United States and work on J visas, teaching elementary school, for example. They might bring their spouses or children because they're there for a full academic year or more in many cases.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Also, how much does the application cost? What's the application cost for a J1 visa?
For the recruitment fee or?
For the interview.
So this is in the process of being changed a little bit, but right now it's $160.
$160, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I recall when I was in Medellin, Colombia, I went there. I considered it a self-immersion program because I was fascinated with Latin America, and I thought Colombia was the best place to learn the culture. I didn't know the language at the time, but I did learn. I became proficient in Spanish while I was there, and I really can vouch to any cultural exchange program. The benefits are just endless, especially when you go back to your home country. You can take back the values you learned from that country back to your home country. Can you speak to the J1 program as far as the rewards and learning from not only the American industry, but also Americans learning from foreigners coming to help out? Can you speak to that?
No, it's a great question, and it does go both ways. This program isn't just for participants that are there being placed and kind of getting exposure to U.S. culture or different parts of the United States or different aspects of U.S. life, but it's also for citizens of the United States. We value having people come that we can learn from, exchange with, and be exposed to. And J program participants are placed all over the United States, in every state, in a whole range of different types of environments, with families and institutions, with large businesses, with small businesses. It really is a great chance to see many different sides of the United States, and for the United States to meet and engage with the rest of the world. So all of those things are fantastic aspects of the program.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
When an applicant applies for the J1 interview, when will they receive a receipt that they have a date, an interview date?
So our online appointment system should tell you as you make the appointment whether you have a confirmed date and time or not. Right now, as I said, we've been putting a lot of availability onto the system. We want to make sure we give as much bandwidth to J visas early in the season as we possibly can. Even this week, we had appointments that didn't go filled because we've been putting so much availability onto the system. So we encourage you, go onto the system, look now, keep looking if you don't find one, because we're continually putting new availability and new dates and new times onto that system for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And also, after almost 2 years of COVID-19 mitigation protocols, we're really excited to get this program back up and running and have students apply. Can you speak to how we are going about accepting more applicants during this time?
Absolutely. So I mentioned, I know there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of disappointment over the last couple of years based on our inability to fully process J visa cases. 2020, because of the situation in the United States, a lot of businesses weren't hiring or they weren't able to accept sponsored J participants. That year was very devastating for a lot of students who had intended to go. 2021, again, we were precluded by presidential proclamation from processing J visas right up until the 1st of April. Once the 1st of April hit, we opened a massive number of those appointments and were able to satisfy most of the demand in Jamaica for that year. A lot of folks weren't able to get in, but we were able to do every bit we could during the course of that year. This year, fortunately, the circumstances have changed quite considerably. The COVID situation in Jamaica is fairly stable. We're still maintaining social distancing and other types of protective measures here in the embassy, but the number of people we can bring through is significantly increased from these prior years. So it's a great time to come in. We're a little more limited in the staffing we have, but this is a priority category for us, and we're giving as much bandwidth to appointments for J's as we possibly can right now.
Awesome. That's great news, Jeff. And we're getting ready to wrap this up shortly. I will wait to see if there are some more questions out there. But Jeff, while we're waiting, did you have any closing remarks or anything you wanted to reiterate about the J1 visa program?
I'll go back to some of the tips and guidance I gave at the start of our session. The first is, again, come early, get your appointment early, get in as early as you possibly can. I know a lot of you are waiting on DS 2019s or to be recruited, but the earlier you can get those steps taken care of and get in the door, the better off we all are in getting you to the United States on the program. Again, be prepared, make sure you have all the documents you need, and be prepared for your interview by understanding the requirements of the program and being prepared to talk about them at interview. I'll mention again, knowing your rights, making sure you're aware of what recourse you have if there are any issues in the United States, reading this pamphlet, understanding who you can turn to if there are any issues, very important to us, and it's important that you pay attention to that as well. And finally, your responsibilities, making sure you know when you're supposed to be back, how long you can be in the United States, what the precise terms of your visa are. That helps protect you against any misunderstandings or potential issues in the future as well. So make sure you respect the terms of your visa.
Awesome. Thanks again, Jeff.
You're welcome.
It has been a pleasure to be with you all. on our J1 visa interview. Should there be further concerns or questions that have been unaddressed, feel free to email us at kingstonniv@state.gov. Additionally, there is a website listed below that you can go to learn more about the J visa process. I am Vice Consul Mario with Non-Immigrant Visa Chief Jeff.